Good morning, me Alicia. We are starting right on time. Thank you all for joining us here for today's Power Hour. We've got a great topic for you. One of our executive national designers, Dave Nabrotzky, is going to be talking about dealing with rejection, which I think is something that we can all relate with, both in when it comes to our Me Alicia businesses, but also just in life. So that's going to be really, really good. We have a Power Hour post on Facebook. So go ahead and I know we've gotten a few questions so far, a few comments. Go ahead and comment on your questions or your experiences, things that you would like for Dave or I to respond to as it relates to this topic. And so go do that on Facebook if you have any questions. A couple reminders before we jump in. One, in order to guarantee delivery by Valentine's Day of the Sweetheart set, we recommend that you order by February 6th. So that's on Thursday, I think. So make sure that you place any orders or encourage your customers to place any orders by the 6th for Valentine's Day. As we've said before, these pieces will still be available after the 6th and even after Valentine's Day, but you get them at a discount when you buy them in the set. So even if you just want to buy some to stock up on your inventory, it's a great idea to buy 5 or 10, and then you get that free silver desire for every 5 that you buy. And you're getting them at a discounted price, so you can continue to sell them year-round, and you'll earn even more of a commission than you would if you sold them in the set as well, if that makes sense. So not a bad idea to really stock up now while you get a discount. And I think that's pretty much it. Hopefully everybody has seen the information about the Elite Retreat. We're really excited about this promotion, and we hope that you guys all step up to the challenge. I know that every single person can totally do it, especially with Canada in pre-launch. Pre-launch was incredible in the U.S. We signed up so many designers during pre-launch. People get really excited about the concept. It's new. It's exciting. They want to get in at the ground level. So if you have friends or family in Canada, definitely be reaching out to them. See if they have friends or family that you can reach out to as well. And, of course, as we've said before, I think that the entire population of Canada is the same as, like, just the population of California or something. Don't quote me on that, but it's something like that. So there's tons of opportunity in your own backyard. So still be reaching out, recruiting, selling, hold fashion events. Holding fashion events is the best way, A, to earn awesome commission, and B, to really get word of the opportunity out there. That's the best way. So many people recruit from their events and their fashion events. And so be holding events and just talking. Don't be afraid to talk about the opportunity that you have seen with Me Alicia and reach out to others as well. And then you could qualify for the Elite Retreat as well as build this awesome business. We've also talked about the Success Start program. We've got some good things coming out with Success Start. Be talking to your teams about this. You should be receiving a phone call from support in the next couple of days. We'll also be posting some stuff on Facebook, but we've got some resources coming out to help you totally understand the program as well as track your own progress, help train your team and your downline so that everybody's achieving, everybody's earning charms and building habits for, to have a successful business. So those are the main things that we wanted to just keep at the front of your mind. I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to Dave.
Thanks, Michael, and good afternoon, Me Alicia Designers. It is great to be with you. It feels so good to be part of Me Alicia, to be part of such an explosive company as we're getting ready to launch Canada and really as we're launching the U.S. and launching our own businesses. But I will say it doesn't feel so good to sometimes be rejected, and that's the topic of today. And I'm grateful for the chance I have to spend the next hour or so with you to share some ideas and some principles that I've studied throughout my life. I'm still trying to learn throughout my life and implement them, but it's one of the most important things that we can do in our business that will give us really that exponential success. And so let me first just start off by reminding us that Me Alicia is the vehicle. It's not the destination. okay? Sometimes when we start a business and start our Milicia business, we focus on the vehicle. We focus on, what it is that's taken us from point A to point B, and we lose track of what it is what our destination is. And so I bring that up because sometimes when we start something new, whether we've been in direct sales before or whether this is a new venture, sometimes the process of learning how to drive that vehicle can be a little bit uncomfortable. Sometimes we get all excited about this, as we all were. We enroll, and then all of a sudden we kind of realize that the car perhaps is a stick shift and maybe not an automatic, that there's some things that we have to do to get out of our comfort zone to learn about how to best utilize the vehicle so that we can have the best possible experience and reach the destination that we really want to reach. So I am reminded, I'm empathetic that road, that journey is not always easy. And so we're going to tackle a very tough topic today. But as I mentioned, I believe really firmly that if we can just day by day gradually learn more about things that we can do. We're going to talk about some techniques later. We're going to end the call, the last probably half, talking about techniques, things that as I've studied, and this is just not from my own experiences, but this is from reading some really great books and hearing from experts out there in the world of sales and in direct sales in particular, of things that we can do to try to deal with rejection, try to overcome it and put it in perspective. But before we kind of jump into the technique part of it, I want to talk about the psychology of it, how critical it is. And before I get started, I was going to share a quick story, but I saw a post on Facebook from one of our designers, Tammy Knowles, and I absolutely loved it. And I really thought it brought to life, and I thought it would be a good way to kind of start things off. So here's her. She posted 19 hard things to do or that you need to do in order to be successful. All right, number one, you have to make the call you're afraid to make. You have to get up earlier than you want to get up. You have to give more than you get in return right away. You have to care more about others than they care about you. You have to fight when you're already injured, bloody, and sore. You have to feel unsure and insecure when playing it safe seems smarter. You have to lead when no one else is following you yet. You have to invest in yourself even when no one else is. You have to look like a fool at times when you're looking for answers that you don't have. You have to grind out the details when it's easier to shrug them off. You have to deliver results when making excuses is an option. You have to search for your own explanations even when you're told to accept the facts. You have to make mistakes and look like an idiot. You have to try and fail and try again. You have to run faster even if you're out of breath. You have to be kind to people who have been cruel to you. You have to meet deadlines that are unreasonable and deliver results that are unparalleled. You have to be accountable for your actions, even when things go wrong. You have to keep moving towards where you want to be, no matter what's in front of you. You have to do the hard things, the things that no one else is doing, the things that scare you, the things that make you wonder how much longer you can hold on. Those are the things that define you. Those are the things that make the difference between living a life of mediocrity or outrageous success. And I would tell you, I love that. Thank you, by the way, Tammy, for posting that. I have found that your level, my level, your level, our level of success in life, not just in the Milicia business, but in life, will be dependent upon your ability to tolerate discomfort. This is true in our business. It's true in relationships. It's true in marriage. It's true in physical growth, right? As we're trying to maybe work out. I love the analogy of weights. That you when you first start some kind of exercise program and you start lifting some weights, that first day or two you feel very uncomfortable, right? You're in pain, you're sore. And how many times do we get through those first couple of days and then often we just quit? And what do we say? Gosh, this exercise, lifting these weights, this is just not for me. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel comfortable. And so we stop. And then we pick it back up maybe a couple months later or a year later or whatever it is that we want to start that program up again. We go through that same process over and over again. So I would tell you that unless we kind of tackle the issue and push through some of our fears, the process, although it is uncomfortable at times and it is difficult, I would submit to you that the process of not dealing with it and not facing those fears and confronting them, that process, the alternative, is even more difficult. It is even more uncomfortable because you will pay a price one way or another. And in fact, the second way of not facing our fears, I have found that you're not only going to go through that same discomfort, but you're going to not end up in the destination that you want to be in. So great analogy. I love just that thought of working our muscles. And it is, we live in a world that tries to lull us in a state of comfort and to avoid opposition. I like to think of it as, it's been coined as the natural man or the natural person. The natural person in us prefers to lift donuts rather than lift weights, right? The natural person prefers to use our phones to play games like Candy Crush, which is a fun game, by the way, rather than call someone and have the opportunity to possibly get crushed while inviting them to make to make the most of life, or an opportunity to share your excitement. And so the natural person wants to avoid that stuff. When the natural person starts a new business in direct sales or even in Neolicia, it can feel uncomfortable at first, right? How many times have we heard, and I've heard this, and to be honest, it upsets me, but it pains me, it saddens me when I hear this. How many times have you heard this before, or have you said it yourself, when perhaps something didn't go your way? I've heard people say, you know what, sales or this business, it's just not for me. And then they quit. Really? It's not that Neolicia isn't for you, or maybe that sales isn't for you. It's that maybe feeling uncomfortable and getting to know your insecurities and your fears is what's not for you. So you have a choice, right, to run away from those fears again, to leave that couch of comfort, to commit to picking up some weights, and let's get past the pain those first couple of days and start step by step learning how to put together a simple exercise program that will push past those first moments of discomfort, so that you can be in a position 5 and 10 years from now, or even in a year from now, that you can now lift weights that you never even thought was possible, and be in a condition that you never thought was possible. And so, all right, before we jump into this again, that's my rah. I promise you, I leave you my faith, my commitment, my testimony, whatever you want to call it, that this process of overcoming your fears, with dealing with rejection, is so worth it. If you will learn this principle here in Neolicia, I don't care if it takes you a month or a year or 3 years or 5 years. Don't give up on it. Learn to overcome that. Because if you will learn to overcome that, think of how much power that will add in your life. Think of how you will become a better mom, a better spouse, a better community servant, whatever it may be, if you can learn to overcome that. Because I'll tell you, this little scapegoat of self isn't just for you, is really a bunch of hogwash, in my opinion. That's about the strongest, I think, words a pastor can use, hogwash. But it really is. Look, you are in sales every day of your life, whether you're doing Neolicia or not, right? Every day you are having to sell something, whether it's you're in a group of friends and you're trying to decide what kind of movie you're going to go see that night, right? Everybody gives their 2 cents. I'll tell you this, as a mother, right, or as a father, you will have an opportunity many times to be a salesman for your kids. You will have to learn how to sell to them the importance of telling the truth versus telling a lie. You will have to sell to them the value of not doing drugs. You need to sell to them, things that are principally based and how to stand up for what is right and to do the right thing. So let's do this journey together and learn the principles and skills that will help us. All right. Let us jump into, I'm going to read a little quote from a wonderful psychologist and author. His name is David Barton, and he talks about the need for acceptance. So I'm just going to read a few paragraphs of this, and we'll jump into a few more principles. All right. I can't give you the surefire formula for success, but I can give you a formula for failure. Try to please everybody all the time. Most people want to be liked. They hate the thought that people may not like them. So they spend much of their lives being what other people want them to be. But how does this need for acceptance come about? And where did it originate from? There are possibly several different explanations for this innate need of acceptance. And so I'm going to kind of share one of the psychologists, his name is Carl Rogers, and he came up with this theory called client-centered therapy. And he says the process of learning the need for acceptance begins in infancy. For example, Sophie is an 8-month-old baby girl. Okay? When Sophie does something opposite to her parents' beliefs, values, and attitudes, they show her disapproval to her. What they offer her instead is called conditions of worth. These conditions of worth imply that she is only worth their love and affection if she accepts their values, attitudes, and beliefs as her own and abides by them. And if she doesn't accept these conditions, the love or their love is withheld. Like Sophie, most children will interject these conditions of worth and adopt them as their own, thus following a process where they will replicate the behaviors and qualities of their parents. As a result, they will desert their own valuing process and adopt the valuing process of others to maintain love and affection from them. Once her valuing process, I just accidentally hit the wrong page, sorry. Once her valuing process moves from internal to external, she can be described as having acquired conditions of worth. Her sense of worth is now dependent on how others regard her. Of course, these conditions of worth can come from many sources and change over time. They may include friends, family, peers, partners, groups, religion, cultures, therapists, bosses, prospects, and clients. From this process, we can see that people get a sense of worth on how well they please other people. They become puppets with other people pulling their strings. They need to be accepted so great that they are willing to cut themselves off from their true selves, from their talents and their abilities, and become someone they are not. He then shares a very powerful statements in there. We're going to talk a little bit later about, we'll kind of tie the power hour today about infinite worth and conditions of worth, and I'm going to tie it back into this story. So remember the things I just shared with you. Another example he shares was about this boy, or young man I should say. His name was John. And he wanted to be, John, this kid, wanted to be a chef his whole life. But his father wanted him to be a lawyer, just like he was. And his father couldn't understand for the life of him why John wanted to spend his life working in this hot kitchen, right, cooking food for other people. He thought it was degrading for his son to be serving food to other people. Now, do you think John, right, now think about this, for years and years and years, he was conditioned by his father. Now, do you think John went on to become a chef or a lawyer? If you guessed lawyer, you're correct, right? John couldn't accept until others accepted him first. He had internalized his father's conditions of worth and thus wasted much of his life trying to align his self-image with that of his father. Unfortunately, John wasn't a very good lawyer, right? He was unable to represent others when he could barely even represent himself and stand up for himself. This is a problem, one of the greatest disadvantages regarding the need for acceptance. When you internalize the demand that others must show you full acceptance or your life is going to be awful, then you're placing yourself on the extreme end of this acceptance or rejection spectrum, if you will. If you demand this level of acceptance, you will become highly sensitive to the slightest suggestion of rejection from other people. And that's what I think is one of the things that makes sales so difficult, is because we become, and I would say even especially women who are, if I could stereotype or generalize, are very sensitive people. Right? And that's a very, very positive thing, but it can also be worked to your detriment if you're not careful. And unless you are, cognitive of the things that are going on in your mind. Look, I'm going to tell you, ladies, 80% of your success in this business is going to come from what goes on in your own head. 20% is going to be based on, the fundamentals and learning about fashion events and learning, things about the jewelry and this and that. And those things are important. Don't mistake what I'm trying to say here. But if you will learn to use this Me Alicia business and this culture that we're creating here and really understand what it is that causes you to think the way that you think, what causes you to value yourself, what causes you to give yourself the worth that you do. See, that's the challenge with most of us is we feel our worth is dependent upon certain results. When we pick up the phone and we call someone, we are so worried of that fear of rejection or that fear of failure, right, that it almost handicaps us to even want to even make the phone call in the first place. And in essence, we almost self-sabotage our own success. And I've seen it happen many, many, many times. So you've got to be very, very careful in being aware of this and making sure that it doesn't kind of overtake your life. All right. The next little principle we're going to talk about is that you are what you think you are. Much of normal day-to-day life is run on unconscious, automatic thinking processes. Your beliefs are such a process. Once formed, your beliefs help you to move through your life in a fairly efficient manner. They help you make rapid decisions and save cognitive or thinking energy. For example, you don't wake up each morning, right, and have to form new beliefs about your environment or life. There's things that happen that you just already know. You wake up knowing that fire is hot, ice is cold. When you're hungry, you can satisfy that by eating something. When you're thirsty, you can satisfy that by drinking something. You don't have to relearn these things over and over again because you've already learned them once. So some of those things are good, right? Some of our beliefs are good. They help us to achieve goals. They help us to get through life day by day. But some of our beliefs are not so good, and they stand in the way of our success. One of the things, and I'm really going to try hard, by the way, not to make this a psychology class, but it is, foundational to understanding, right? As you're talking about dealing with rejection and how to overcome it, of course, it's a psychological thing. But one of the a very well-known psychologist, Albert Ellis, was one of the first ones that kind of studied these types of things, and he came up with three things. He sums it up into three kind of emotions, if you will, and although these are false, these are things that we kind of deal with as a Me Alicia designer and in life. Number one, others must treat me kindly or they are completely rotten. Number two, the world must give me what I want to be happy or I will die. And number three, I must be good at everything and fail at nothing or I am worthless. These beliefs sit at the core of your thinking processes. They are the engines that drive other thoughts, the specific ones that you experience on a day-to-day basis. When you're trying to make a sale or engage a prospect, you probably will not hear yourself saying these words, right? The exact words I just mentioned, like, others must treat me kindly or they're completely rotten. However, your specific thoughts may be based on this belief. The belief sits in your subconscious mind and feeds your conscious thoughts. For example, you may want to phone a prospect or a friend and make an appointment. You feel reluctant and resistant to pick up the phone because in your mind you may be saying to yourself, look, they're going to be rude to me. They're not going to want to talk to me because maybe they're too busy. Or I'm not going to get an appointment, so I'm wasting my time. They're not going to like my offer. They're not going to like my company. They're not going to like me, and so on. And we kind of, before we even pick up the phone, these negative self-defeating thoughts, if you will, are producing the reluctance that you feel to make the call. So as you can see, thinking creates emotions which affects behavior. And if you will pay special attention to your thoughts, you can identify your self-talk and hear yourself, what you're thinking. It's a good idea, by the way, I would tell you to write down, what you're saying to yourself and what it is that you say to yourself in your mind that makes you so fearful. Take a minute. Maybe not right now, but sometime after we're done with our training today, take some time on a piece of paper and write down what is it at the core that really makes you fear rejection. What is it at the core that makes you feel failure? And try to identify that insecurity. I know that's a really tough place to go. And sometimes when we're trying to look within our own heart and identify things that we're not so good at. Again, it's uncomfortable. We want to avoid that. We want to do things that make us feel better in that. But if you'll identify kind of that core belief system, that's kind of the heart of our training today is identifying your core belief system and identify those things in your mind that serve you well and identify those thoughts in your mind that don't serve you well and then do something about it. We're going to talk about some of the techniques towards the end here, things that you can do to try to do something about it. Okay? All right. He goes on a little bit later and says, others, he talks about this one core belief. He says, others must treat me kindly or they are completely rotten. And he says, if you break this thought down, what you're really saying is they must 110% of the time treat me kindly or they're just a detestable human being. Or in other words, what you're saying is they must, they should, or they better treat you kindly, right, when you give them a call and you pick up that phone, because you can't stand it if they don't. Okay? And my life will end if they don't. I mean, sometimes we put so much value on it that it kind of feels that way. And it's the most awful thing that could ever happen to you. The demand that they absolutely must be kind and respectful to you creates a strong negative emotional response that you experience, which drains you of your energy and your motivation. So write that principle down, by the way. I will tell you that most of your worry in your life and in this business is wasted energy. You're worrying about things that will probably never even come to pass. Okay? And we're going to talk a lot about kind of some of the mental imagery that our thoughts do and how that leads to some of our actions. Okay, let's talk about the next principle here. Give me 1 second. Let me get to another part here. When I talk about trying to avoid things, this is a really, really important principle because usually the best way or the only way that we can deal with our fears, whether it's fear of rejection or fear of failure, is to avoid that call altogether from the very beginning. We don't even want to pick up the phone. And so we dodge this activity by doing other stuff. All right, what kind of other stuff? I think you have to be careful, we have to be careful, that we are mindful of what we do day to day. Sometimes that other stuff, for example, it might be Facebook. Sometimes I worry that designers will bury themselves 3 to 4 to 5 hours a day in Facebook. Why? Because that's sometimes a place where they can go and feel safe. They don't feel that rejection, and it feels good there. Think about, you think Facebook understands, by the way, not to get off on a tangent, but you think they understand the psychology of rejection? Right, what's their whole principle? Reaching out, developing friends, right, requesting a friend. And what happens if that friend says no or doesn't accept that? Do they send you a notification? Absolutely not. Right, that's the worst thing they could have ever have done. Because if they do that, then women and men get to a point where they don't even want to get on Facebook because for that possibility of how they may feel when they do this. But they, obviously, when people do accept it, you're then notified of that, and it feels like this happy place. But be careful, ladies, be careful that you don't allow the other, quote, unquote, other stuff to fill your day-to-day activity, okay? Because it's very, very easy to do, and you've got to be very, very mindful of that. All right, let's talk about self-fulfilling prophecy. I love this. Paul Watzlawick, which is an awesome name, says, a self-fulfilling prophecy is an assumption or prediction that purely as a result of having been made causes the expected or predicted event to occur and thus confirms its own accuracy. He shares this classical research, this is back in the 60s, I believe, where he talks about how they went to, this group of researchers went to an elementary school to conduct IQ tests on all the students. And they randomly selected names, okay, totally at random, and proceeded to tell the teacher that these particular children that were selected were about to bloom, all right, quote, unquote, academically. Now, naturally, it was not true, as the students were chosen completely random, but it was interesting as they went back they discovered that these bloomers that they had labeled showed significant improvements on their IQ tests, compared to the other children. And they chalked it up and said, these teachers had expected this to happen. They assumed that, and would have acted different, would have treated these kids, whether it given them more attention, more feedback, more challenging tasks, more opportunities, whatever it may be. But they effectively, made this self-fulfilling prophecy a reality. So I'm going to tell you, how does this apply to you in your Me Alicia business? If you predict people will reject you, then they will. If you in your mind pick up that phone and before you even dial that, if you can kind of visualize that other person saying no and what's going to happen and how it's going to make you feel, I promise you, chances are it's going to roll out exactly that way, all right? What you believe often will become your reality, and this research, showed that. So the best thing that you can do is to, again, record day-to-day your actions and your thoughts, whether it's a diary or something, but you've got to kind of gather that data and then analyze that and see what it is that's keeping you stuck, keeping you from progressing in the business. All right, let's talk about this next thing that this psychologist David Burton talks about is schemas or mental frameworks. All right, he says a single footstep will not make a path on the earth. So a single thought will not make a pathway in the mind. To make a deep physical path, we walk again and again. To make a deep mental path, we must think over and over the kind of thoughts that we wish to dominate our lives. We need schemas to process information quickly and with minimum effort. Let me share. Maybe rather than paraphrase it, I'm going to share another quick example that he talks about of this guy named Roger. And he says, schemas may not be accurate and may lock us into a particular way of looking at the world, which can be self-defeating. Now I'm going to talk about this example of this guy that kind of goes to a party and tries to develop some friends. But apply it to yourself. As I'm kind of sharing this example, I want you to think, how does this apply to me in my life? How does this apply to my fashion event? How does this apply to my business? Okay? All right, so Roger holds this schema or this kind of mental framework that he is useless at making new friends and will be rejected if he even tries at a party. Roger gets invited to a party, which he decides to go. All right, he arrives and notices several people mulling around. Instead of going over, introducing himself, and making new acquaintances, he follows his usual practice of standing by himself in the corner of the room. The odd person says hello, and Roger responds politely, but no one really engages in a conversation with Roger. Finally, Donald arrives, who Roger knows from work, and moves over to hang around him for the rest of the evening. Roger doesn't initiate any new conversations with other people, and finally leaves the party having met no one new. He goes home feeling useless for maintaining the status quo and making no new friends. He feels a sense of rejection, as if something is wrong with him. He asks himself, why did nobody come and talk with me? Why do people ignore me? And so on. So based on what you currently know about schemas, what we just reviewed, what would you advise Roger, if you're his sponsor, you're his mentor, what would you advise Roger to do regarding his fear of rejection? All right? You know that schemas are mental frameworks and that they're hard to change and that they tend to make themselves come true. So let me ask you a few questions. All right? So think about what would you do? What would you say to him? Would you point out that he failed to notice that people were friendly to him? That there appear to be several people at the party who may have been eager to make new friends as well? Would you point out that he failed to notice this because they would have evidence? They would have been evidence that contradicted his schema, and contradictory information is usually ignored. Sounds like Roger might need our help to see his blind spots. Sometimes it's not what you notice that counts. It's what you don't notice that's even more important. We get so used to seeing the world around through certain perspectives that we fail to realize that there's other windows or other lenses to kind of look through. And I would tell you, when it comes to if I were to sum up this, dealing with rejection, it often is not this major overhaul that we have to do with our personalities. It's small and simple things. It's changing the lens that we choose to look through and view each and every day. And if we will kind of be committed to making those gradual, those small changes, that lens drastically will affect the things that we see in this business and in this life and what we actually get out of it. So, anyways, all right, that's enough about schemas. Let's go on to, let's see, let me skip to, for the sake of time. I love this principle. We're going to start talking about some of the techniques now, okay? You ready? Let's do this. All right, awfulizing. I love this. This was a great chapter in David Barton's book. And he says, when people exaggerate the consequences of an event, be it in the past, the present, or the future, then they are engaging in awfulizing, right? They typically use words such as horrible, terrible, or awful. This type of thinking typically fails the logic test, as someone might say, wasn't that movie just awful? But then on the other occasion, someone may say, isn't it awful that those 10 people died in a fire? Now, how bad can a movie be to be as terrible as 10 people dying in a fire? The one event is so much worse than the other. It's not even logical that a bad movie can be as awful as 10 people dying in a fire. However, people typically use language that exaggerates an experience or event that is quite commonplace. Now, you might think speaking like this is trivial and has no effect, but it's well documented that words possess power. So be very mindful of the words that you use and how you express that. Words have the power to do great harm, but also accomplish much good. They have the power to injure and heal. They can start wars or bring about peace. They can make you feel joy or great sadness. They are not idle expressions. Your words will produce emotional reactions in you, which will translate into behaviors. And so it's very important that you're aware of the words that you use in this business especially, and build kind of a vocabulary of success rather than failure. I mean, how many times have we heard that too, right? Sometimes we think of, the worst thing in the world is picking up that phone, or the worst thing is being rejected, or, we really make kind of on the scale of awfulness, we refer to things in kind of a very dramatic way. Let me just share one of the techniques, since we're talking kind of about awfulness, that I really found to be very helpful in my life, in this business, and in life in general, and dealing with things that kind of bad things that happen to us. It's called the awfulness scale. Okay, and it basically is a way to look at things that happen to us. So in your mind, I want you to kind of picture, if I were to say, think of a time in your life that you felt the strongest sense of rejection from someone else. All right, think about that for a second. It might have been recently in Alicia. Maybe it was something else in your life. Maybe it was in a relationship. Maybe it was something. But think for a moment about the last time you felt a strong sense of rejection from somebody. Okay? Now, let's, for just examples' sake, in a sense, let's just talk about the Alicia business. So let's say that a prospect or a good friend just rejected you when you called to make an appointment. Okay? Now, on a scale from 0 to 100, how bad was that experience for you? Most would say, it was maybe a 90 out of 100 or an 80 out of 100. Most people kind of put it at the top of the scale, as they felt really bad about that situation. Now, to get a really clear picture of how awful it is, I think we have to kind of, in our minds, devise this realistic scale of awful events. All right, so here's how he talks about it. Think of, for me, 100, right? So the worst in the scale of awfulness is being burnt to death, right? I can't even imagine just that thought. It's just horrible, right? So that would be 100 to me. A 90 may be, hey, I was diagnosed with the disease and I've got 6 months to live. At 80, I'm paralyzed for my life. Maybe down to a 50, maybe I lost my job. I had my car stolen. Now we're getting down to the 40s. Catching the flu. A 30s, getting a flat tire on your way to work. At 20, getting a parking ticket. a 5, spilling something on your shirt in public or whatever it may be. Okay? So think about that scale for a moment, all right? And I bring this up because I think it's very helpful. In reality, if we can really put things in perspective on this scale of awfulness, it really can kind of help us face that fear of rejection and put it in a little more perspective. David Barton says, keeping the catastrophe scale in your mind when you have a strong emotional response to an event will help you see the event in a more realistic light. Doing so will greatly reduce the emotional disturbance the event creates in your mind, and it will help you deal with the situation much more appropriately. Most people over-exaggerate the awfulness of an event. By using an awfulness scale, you will be in a better position to view your experiences in a much more realistic light. This will, in turn, produce less defeating emotional responses. Okay? All right, so the next technique he talked about is about reframing. He says we can reframe the thought that unless people treat me kindly or are friendly, that they're completely awful people, right? There's something less negative, such as, it's disappointing when people don't treat me kindly, but that doesn't mean that they're awful people. Their actions may be inconsiderate, but that they're still okay. The reframed sentence will leave you feeling less disturbed than the first one because it uses less negative language and doesn't rate the whole person as being bad, only their actions. So again, that's just a real simple technique, but can be a very powerful way to reframe things. And it allows us, I found, to build better relationships. The next technique is mental rehearsal. This is something that I have found very, very helpful and influential, and that is just using mental imagery. We talked before about before we pick up the phone, sometimes we have these self-defeating thoughts of what that conversation is going to be like, or when we approach someone in the grocery store, or whatever it may be, to share with them this opportunity or share with them this concept or whatnot. Again, be very, very careful of that mental imagery. You have to kind of start this process in your mind of having a clear idea of what you want to achieve in that conversation, in that phone call or that approach or that fashion event or whatever it may be, all right? You've got to be clear about your goal and construct a mini movie in your mind, all right? He says, you play this scene on the screen in your mind several times per day. The more you do it, the better the chances that your subconscious mind will believe it. The theory behind this strategy or technique suggests that the mind and central nervous system cannot distinguish between actual and imagined memories. The brain simply records the events as actual experiences. So when you eventually attempt the actual behavior, your mind has already mental experiences to refer to. Use this techniques when to see yourself making phone calls or prospecting or team building or presenting at a fashion event or shaking hands or any other activity that you need to do in sales. See yourself having overcome your fear of rejection, no longer concerned about hearing the word no on a daily basis. See yourself happy. See yourself enjoying the work, achieving your goals, living the life that you want. You got to remember at the end of the day, ladies, this is your movie, all right? You're the director, and you've got to realize that, again, those thoughts and that mental imagery that you do often will translate into your behaviors, and so be very, very mindful of that. All right, this next technique he talks about, how are we doing on time? We've got about 15 minutes. All right. The next technique is worst-case scenario. I love it. He says, the thing we fear most often is the thing that we need to do most but are reluctant to do for the fear that the worst possible outcome might become a reality. For example, you might hate prospecting on the phone, but you say to yourself, if they say no to making an appointment with you, you're going to feel like a complete failure. So ask yourself, with the worst-case scenario, this technique is to say, what's the worst thing that can happen, right? What is it? They might say no. That's pretty much the worst of it. There are plenty of other prospects to call, and this one that said no certainly doesn't prove that you're a failure. Your exaggeration of the consequence of that no will have a far more negative reaching effect than the prospect's response to you. Let me say that again. Your exaggerating of the consequence of the no will have far more negative reaching effects than the prospect's response to you. The worst case scenario has to do with the less with the prospect and more to do with you. If you maintain the same way of thinking, then you become the primary problem and not the prospect, okay? So the worst case scenario is that you've lost a sale, right, and maybe a little bit of income that sale represented. But that's pretty much it. You move on to the next opportunity, you try again, all right? So you're, in reality, the real true effects of that rejection or that no is minimal, all right, by doing the kind of the worst case scenario. So make sure that you do that. Internalize the belief that no doesn't mean that you're useless at your job. It doesn't mean that you're a horrible designer and that you have no future in this business and that you're it's just hopeless, okay? It does not mean that. All right? You are the one that will determine what that worst case scenario will be. So again, think of that lens that you're looking through. Think of the things that have happened in your life that have shaped the way that you view rejection, the way that you view no. I would bet that a lot of it comes back to, remember that first thing I shared about with Sophie, right, this young girl, and how she associated her value and her worth with certain actions that she did or didn't do and how her parents kind of responded to that. Okay, let's talk about the blow-up technique. I love this one. This is so funny. This is similar to kind of the worst-case scenario techniques. And in this instance, we exaggerate the consequences of the no. All right, we blow it out of proportion to kind of the nth degree. And it should be so ridiculous that we can't even help realizing, how outlandish it is. For example, consider the presentation that does not end in a sale. All right, you just did a fashion event, whether it's a one-on-one with a particular friend or a person that you met, or whether it's at a group event. All right, but what's the worst thing that can happen? All right, using the blow-up technique, we get sometimes this following account. And this is going to sound a little bit funny, ladies, but we do this often, all right? So here's sometimes how we translate this no into our mind when we use this blow-up technique. The prospect listens to your presentation, interrupting frequently with non-relevant questions while sending text messages and answering the phone intermittently. After you finish your presentation, the prospect suddenly gets up and starts laughing loudly at your offer. His voice is so loud it attracts the attention of other staff members in the office or other ladies at the fashion event, I'll personalize it, who come to investigate the commotion. They all join in the laughter, and soon there is this huge ruckus bellowing out in the building. This attracts the attention of bystanders and passerbys who include a TV crew who quickly start filming the affair and broadcasting it as breaking news on national TV. The gathering of crowds around the building causes a traffic jam on the main highway which runs past the building that you're in. This attracts the attention of the police, who soon cordon off the area, and within minutes the area is swamped by police, a SWAT team, and even military personnel trying to control a rapidly destabilizing situation. Your boss sees the TV news and calls you to fire you on the spot for making such a spectacle of the company, and so on. Now, this story is obviously very silly, right? Very ludicrous. However, it represents what is often the level of emotional response people experience over relating benign situations. They blow up the event to ridiculous proportions and make themselves feel very bad as a result. So be mindful of that. As you approach someone, whether it's a grocery store clerk, whether it's a good friend, right, whether it's a neighbor, put those things in perspective, right? What is that? What's the worst thing that's going to happen? Don't blow that up that it's the end of the world if they say no, right? Don't take that personally. They're not saying no to you. They're saying just not right now. Look, timing is everything in this business, okay? You guys are all on this call and have joined this Me Alicia opportunity because the timing was right in your life. There are people that you will approach that the timing just may not be right in their life. But there may be things that you can say that kind of increase your chances, if you will, of trying to attract people and get them to make a decision to do this. So I don't underestimate that. There are things that you can do to try to help that. But you can be the what is that quote? The best tasting peach, right, in the world, But some people are just going to hate peaches, and that's just the way that it is. No matter how good you can sometimes develop to be and skills that you can develop, there will be people that still are going to say no, and that's just okay. All right, next technique. We've got about 10 minutes left here. We got to go fast. The time projection technique. This is a great one. How much will experiencing rejection from a particular individual today affect you 5 years from now? Assuming that you continue to prospect, make appointments, present information about your product, service, or business, will the rejection you encounter today still affect you 5 years from now? How about 2 years from now, or even a year from now, or 6 months from now, or 3 months from now? Every rejection experienced now will make you more tolerant to rejection, and every lost sale will encourage you to try again. You will get opportunities to develop a new belief system about yourself. If you will be patient, ladies, if you will be patient, you can develop, here in Me Lisa, you can develop a new belief system about yourself and can become a better salesperson. And yes, you're going to have, more sales and more income, but more than anything, you are going to learn how to deal and put with rejection and put that into perspective. All right. Let me just share. Let me go to one thing really quick here. One of the things. Let me kind of end with this. Hopefully, by the way, some of these techniques. I wish I could talk for another 20 minutes. So maybe what I'll do is I'll post. I've got a couple of worksheets that I can post on our Facebook page that will kind of help. Not just some notes, but just some reminders of different techniques that we can do to overcome rejection. But I want to kind of tie this all back into this infinite worth thing. I was talking with Sean Brown, our president, the other day, and he's been doing lots of traveling, him and Annalise, and to various places all throughout the U.S. and even Canada. And we've got all these different sayings and different mantras and, infinite possibilities, which I love, by the way, because it really signifies what our concept is all about. But he said to me, Dave, what's really resonating with people is this infinite worth, this saying. And it really it really hit home to me. It really reminded me again how me, Alicia, is just this vehicle, right? It's just this vehicle. It's going to provide this environment, the situation that if we are careful and we properly learn how to drive this vehicle, we really can reach destinations that are so incredible in our business and in our personal life. I love the fact that sales is one of the toughest things that we can do. It really is. I'll be honest, right? It's the reason why it's one of the most top paying industries or professions that you can have out there, because most people aren't going to be willing to face their fear. And if you are, will allow yourself to go through some of that and to kind of retrain, right, reshape that lens, I promise you can have incredible amounts of success. And more importantly, this whole journey will be so much more enjoyable to you. You can then take the things that you learned here and apply that into your own personal life as a mother or as a father or as a community servant or what it may be. And lastly, I would tell you this, and I'll turn it back over to you, Michael, if we have any questions. I'm out in front of my Facebook, so I'm not sure if there's been any additional posts since we've been talking. But, one of the things that in fact, let me ask you that, Michael. Is there any particular questions really quick before I kind of, cap off my comments?
Yeah, we've had a few who just are asking you for, specific examples or whatever. Let me read you just a couple. There are two.
Sure.
The first one says, what is a positive response when someone says very emphatically no when you ask them about the opportunity or holding a fashion event? I want to end on a happy note, but nothing ever comes to mind.
That's a great question. I think a lot of it, this is kind of an intangible thing, maybe not even so much exactly what to say, but it's more the approach. I really think that's the most important part of that whole thing. For that situation to turn to be a positive thing is remembering that your approach to them is you have that servant's heart. I think Sean even talked about that a little bit. Annalise has shared that many, many times, right? Stop trying to sell someone. If they just emphatically say no to something, you know what? That's okay. Sometimes there will be times where I like to try to dive into it a little bit if you can. Sometimes that might be appropriate. Sometimes it may not be. If people are really, really emphatic and just closed-minded, often it's probably not even worth it, to be honest, in trying to work through that stuff. So you've got to be very careful. Kind of listen to your heart in those situations, because you will come across people that just won't be open-minded at all. And for those are the people you don't want to waste your time with. You want to just keep moving on. But, my comment would be to still be grateful for that opportunity of talking with them and turn it into something positive, especially with friends. I would say, look, hey, no problem. I just wanted to I've even shared this with some of my friends. Look, I plan on being very successful at Me Alicia. I have no doubt whatsoever that we are going places, that I've aligned myself with an incredible company, an incredible concept that will revolutionize the industry and change the way that women wear jewelry. And, Bob or Carol or whoever I'm talking to, look, I don't know if this is the right fit for you, but I know I care enough about you, and I'm so excited. I wanted to at least share this opportunity with you, and if the timing's not right in your life, that's okay. But I just at least kind of wanted that off my shoulders, if you will, and I wanted to make sure that I did my part and at least sharing with you, what it is that I'm doing. And if the timing's not right, hey, no problem. I wish you the very best of luck, and if things, ever change in your life and you have interest in the business, give me a call. I would also maybe, Michael, I would encourage them to shift gears a little bit. Sometimes when we approach people, whether it's in a phone call or an individual one-on-one, sometimes we have kind of one thing in mind. We approach them with, look, I'm going to try to get them to be a designer. And they may emphatically say no for whatever reason, and especially if you can't dive into it right then and there. Take them to something else. Look, you don't want every single person to only become a designer. You're going to want customers. You're going to want people that hold fashion events. You're going to want people that maybe say no to all three of those things, but maybe they're a perfect candidate to give you referrals. So make sure in those situations that you keep positive about it. Don't feel like you have to overcome them all and have the right thing to say. I don't even know what the exact right thing to say is to each and every person but if you will have a servant's heart and just be grateful for that chance that they were willing to talk with you and keep it positive and thank them for their time. Look, later in their life, at least in the majority of people, they will appreciate that. They will remember how you made them feel in that conversation. If you are very combative and you're trying to overcome these things and prove them wrong, right? And sometimes we do that because of our emotions get the best of us. That can be a very uncomfortable thing. People remember they will remember everything you say, but they will remember how you make them feel. So that would be kind of my comment on that. Be mindful of that, and because those situations, people have a change of heart. Sometimes 6 months from now, sometimes 6 years from now, and just keep it open, and things will come back to you.
Hey, we have one more question. What suggestions do you have for when people say no without learning the info? For some reason, this is the ultimate rejection. I know I should think of it like a tic-tac, but it's really frustrating when they say no without getting any info in order to make an educated decision.
I think sometimes just a simple follow-up question. Again, it depends on kind of the environment and what the situation is and who you're talking to, but I think you can, in a kind way, ask. You need to get a little bit more information. What is it that's the root of that concern? And simply ask them. What is it about the opportunity that maybe causes you to be a little bit hesitant? What is it about the purchase, or what is it about hosting a fashion event, or whatever it may be? Try to find out, in a way, and try not to say the words why. Well, why not? Why this? Because people get really defensive when you do that. So just try to word it in a way, hey, help me understand, or kind of the whole feel, felt, tell method, right? Look, I understand how you feel. Others, have felt the same way. They've had this concern or that concern, but you can kind of walk them through that. But try to find out what is it at the heart of it that is causing them to not want to do it. And if you can identify that in a friendly, casual way, again, be real, be kind, have that servant's heart. You'd be surprised how many people will open up to you. if you allow your emotion to control your conversations, and I'll kind of end with this, and it's we're out of time. If you will allow your emotions to control your conversations, often it'll be a negative experience for you, right? When you held something, I don't want to say sacred in this situation because this is just business and jewelry that we're talking about, but think about things in your life that you do kind of hold very personal and sacred, and you know, often the reason that you don't share that with other people is because you fear that they're going to take something that you are very excited about or that you hold special or that you hold sacred, and they might poo-poo on that. And so the alternative is just to stay away from that approach in the first place. I encourage you, ladies, as I kind of wrap up the call here, I encourage you to be very mindful of a couple things. Be mindful of the quote-unquote other stuff that you do each and every day that is perhaps not a scapegoat, but it's a retreat from doing the things that you really need to do. It's keeping you away from the things that you really are going to grow your business, that are really going to push you to success, that are really going to help you to overcome your fears. And if you'll be mindful of that and just work on it day by day. Look, there's two different approaches in this, right? There's this immersive, all right, here's my fear, and I'm just going to tackle it. Some people do that, right? I fear approaching people, but so I'm just going to go out and start talking to 100 people in the parking lot. Hey, that works for some people. Some people need to take it very slow. Look, if you fear rejection, you know, go to a parking lot or just go talk to one person. Keep the conversation really simple and take away this pressure on yourself to have this result, that they're going to host a party or that they're going to buy something from you. Right? That's what I love about the Fast Start, this Smart Start program. It's ingenious, right? I love it. If we will focus, ladies, on this week, if you've learned anything from this week besides trying to overcome your fears, it's focus on the simple things. Focus on the Smart Start, which is simply just having conversations with people, having a servant's heart. Don't have this preconceived outcome that has to happen each and every time. If you do, you're going to have fears that are going to develop in your heart that are going to stifle you from even doing the action or behavior in the very first place. Anyways, that being said, I love you. Thank you all for your time. We'll turn the time back over to you, Michael.
Thanks, Dave. That was an awesome call. Somebody on Facebook asked if you could post the answer to the rest of the questions on Facebook. I think we got to all of the questions, but if anybody had any follow-up questions or anything like that, then our social media team would be more than happy to answer any questions, and I'm sure that Dave would be willing to kind of field some of those questions as well. So that was an awesome training, and I hope that we all can take something away from that. Everybody get out there and just don't be afraid of rejection. Honestly, this is an older story that we've told before, but one of our designers said that her husband challenged her to get 3 no's per day, and she had a hard time getting her no's because people wanted to say yes. And so maybe challenge yourself to be rejected because, A, it's going to help you understand what the objections are, and B, it's going to help you kind of build a tough skin, and that rejection is not going to hurt as much, and you're going to know how to deal with it. So anyway, hopefully everybody was able to make it on this call. Share it with your downline. We'll post the YouTube link to your back office later today. So if anybody wasn't able to listen to the call, they'll be able to listen to it later on. So I hope everybody has a great week. Get out there, get rejected, and we'll talk to you next